Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Live here, and it's that quiet part of January, so... Well, actually, it's been slightly less quiet than usual Januaries, but we have this on the schedule, so we're going to do it anyway. Yes, we're just going to be talking about Breath of the Wild, because you know what? It's bloody lovely. And I don't think there's a time when it isn't appropriate to just talk about how lovely Breath of the Wild is. And I'm not going to be doing it alone, because... that would be me in a closed room and I might go a little bit mad. So please welcome Mr. John and Mr. Zedon, or Zeon.
Hi, I'm Mr. John.
Hey, it's me, Mr. Zedon.
Well, thanks for coming
That's how
along,
you
guys.
say my name when you're not from America, apparently.
Well, I mean, it's not, but it's what's called a meme. It's a meme, Zeon. You'll learn all about them in due course.
Oh, meme.
A meme, indeed. But what we're going to be... Yeah, we're just going to be talking about Breath of the Wild and what we love about it. Who wants to start? I don't know. I don't even know where to begin. It's such a huge game. Do you know what I like? I like the mountains in Breath of the Wild. I love the landscape. I just love... So many open world games completely get large landscapes wrong and they make them sort of a little bit too condensed. It's something I definitely found in Immortals, where the landscape, you know, sort of you had these peaks and troughs and everything everywhere, but as a result, you always felt like you were in kind of like a valley at nearly all times. Breath of the Wild, none of that. It feels like you're just in these huge, expansive areas because everything's just on such an enormous scale. You just look off into the distance, you can see all those mountains over there. It's like real life. I suppose it's the difference between like being in a town and being out in the country. And I'd rather be out in the country.
This game just fixed open worlds for me. Because honestly, I feel like open worlds, before Breath of the Wild, they were hubs for linearity. They were big open sandboxes with little icons that sometimes say, hey, go here and talk to an NPC. Then the NPC goes, hey, go over here. Then you go over there and you come back to the NPC. And that's kind of the formula of what open worlds had. But Breath of the Wild doesn't have that. You kind of make your own waypoints whenever you want to. And as Alex was saying, like sometimes the mountains are just so intoxicating. And you want to climb them and get to the top. And when you're at the top, you find like a Korok or something. But then you look off into the distance and you see another mountain you want to go to. And it's like the objective is what you want it to be rather than just being a dot that you're following the whole time. It's just so ingenious.
So last night I played just a little bit, which I think all you guys probably had some time with the game too. But I went in and I felt the urge to open up my map and kind of like find out where I was because it's been a long time since I've played. And I didn't. I just kind of ran around and I like still remembered where I was because like things seemed like it was somewhat recognizable, even though I was in like a snowy mountain area where I could barely see a thing. I still managed to figure out what part of the map I was on. And while I was running through, I thought that there were some like old, I can't remember if they're old dragon bones or if they're old dinosaur bones or what kind of monster
the
they
Leviathan
are.
bones. They're basically big whales, like the windfish.
Oh, sure. And so I thought, I was kind of like thinking in my head, like ahead of time about if I was in an area that had one. And like a minute or two later, I ended up coming right around the corner and there one was. And it felt like such a rewarding feeling because the game is constantly like with all of its giant mountains and things, it still feels like such a mystery to jump in, but yet it felt like riding a bike, just getting back on and being in that town sort of that like we all grew up in this game, you know, like it's been a while since we've been here, but coming back, we still recognize things, but things are still new.
I started playing this again over the Christmas period. And I went back in, I can't remember the last time I played it, like actually sat down and played a good chunk of it. Like, I think I dabbled for a bit of footage that I needed, but I hadn't played a lot. And I went back into it and I knew where I was, and I was just, rummaging around and things like that. And I found an area that I've literally never been to. And this is my second playthrough. I'm playing through on Master Mode now. I just can't even begin to think of any other game where I've put... I'm actually going to check, because I've got it open at the moment. I'm going to check how long I've played Breath of the Wild. because it's a bloomin' long time. I recently found out how long I played Smash Bros. And it was potentially too long. 460 hours or something. That's probably gone up by now. Breath of the Wild, I've played 235 hours. And I know that I'm personally on the lower end of the spectrum for people who play Breath of the Wild a lot. But even so, I can't think of many games where I've put 235 hours into it. And I just happen to find, without even trying, I just happen to find somewhere that I've never been before. And in fact, opening this up again, just before we started recording this, just to, sort of have it open so I could refer to things if I needed to, I found somewhere I've never been before. And there was a Hinox and everything. And how does it do that? The game is so big and open and inviting, and yet has so many secrets. So many secrets just under the surface, and admittedly, the place I found was literally under the surface. Not all of them are under the surface, but I just, every time I go into the game, and I sort of, occasionally, I'll think, I must have seen everything. Every single time I think that, I'm proved wrong.
Out of curiosity, I just checked my playtime too, and I'm at 330 hours. And I have literally done everything, well, in terms of percentage, I've done everything in Breath of the Wild. I found all the Korok seeds, I've been to every location, and once I found all my Korok seeds, I think that my map said I was at like 99 point something %, and I was like, what on earth am I missing? And I rummaged around for a while, and it turns out the thing that was off my map was this one room in Hyrule Castle, which I'd never been in before, and it's the room with the king's journal in there. And somehow, that's quite an obvious room in the library area, but somehow I missed that. And even though I've been everywhere, there's still things that I'm still discovering. Like the other day, it was reported, well, the other week it was reported, that you can feed squirrels acorns. And then that got me thinking, like, what else can you feed? And I knew for a while that you can feed dogs meat and you can feed horses apples, but it turns out you can also feed the goats and the cows and basically any animal in that game. It's just this living, breathing ecosystem. And it makes sense, but it's nothing I ever considered.
I found out that you can feed the deer. The deer will eat apples. And I tried feeding a fox. You can't. The foxes won't eat anything. I tried poultry. I tried fresh meat. Nothing worked. But yeah, you can just feed the deer. It's really hard to do because generally if you go anywhere near the deer, they are so easily spooked and they just, Junior Birdman the heck out of here. And yet if you can sneak up, I did it from a cliff. I've got a clip that I can show, in fact, because I put it on Twitter. And you can, if you do it from a cliff, from a high enough place, drop the apples down, they'll just wander over and they'll very happily just eat the apples and the apples despawn. And you just, there's no situation where that's going to be of any benefit to the core gameplay or any benefit to, sort of combat or, actually getting on the back of a deer, because it's far easier to just land on them, using the glider. There is no need, no purpose to that. And you know what? I love it. There is no need for it. And yet it is still there. It's that extra creamy layer of richness that makes Breath of the Wild the wonderful stroganoff that it is.
It's experimentation that kind of makes everything work. And I hear a lot of criticisms about experimentation too, because I know a lot of people, for one, don't like weapon durability. But for me, that's kind of a layer of improvisation in this game. It's a game where you have to decide a split second what you're going to do. Are you going to climb that mountain? Are you going to go around it? Are you going to paraglide off a tall cliff? And if you see an enemy camp, are you going to fight them? If you do, you're probably going to lose a weapon. You also might gain a weapon. I think just that split-second decision of whether to keep a horse, whether to keep a weapon, or to do anything is part of why this game is just so fun to explore and move around in.
Has anyone ever... this is something that I don't know if I've discovered. Somebody must have seen it, but I'm curious to know whether you guys... I've already spoken to John about this, but Xeon, have you ever shot an ore deposit with an arrow?
Shot a what?
An ore deposit with an arrow.
I don't think so. What happens?
The arrow catches on fire, and you can then use that to have a flaming arrow.
Oh,
it's
my gosh.
Genuinely useful. But I hear you cry. What if you're in a situation where there are no ore deposits, but you really need a flaming arrow, and there are no sort of torches nearby or anything like that? You can just drop a piece of flint, shoot it, and it also catches fire. I just...
And then so can you pick it up and it becomes a fire arrow in your inventory?
Not. Oh no, it doesn't become a fire arrow. That's bonkers.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, I mean,
Come on,
I
Xeon,
could
that's
see
just
it
not
happening,
logical.
But like to that point though, there's so much cool stuff in this game. Like I found out recently that if you have a bomb, which is Sheikah technology, if you put the bomb down and then get a blue flame, which is in one of the towns, and then light an arrow and then shoot the bomb, it will impact because it's using the Sheikah tech. And again, it makes sense, but it's something that you just wouldn't do unless just someone discovers it online. And it's bonkers how much stuff is just packed into this.
I mean, I just want to go back to Xeon because he was asking about the, you can use the flaming arrow because you can walk over with a bow drawn and your arrow can catch fire from the arrow that is on fire from the flint. It will burn, pretty much immediately. I think you can pick it up if you're quick enough, but it just becomes a normal arrow.
But it creates a source for you to use.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
And now that John's just said those things, I've got to try it. I'm just going to see what happens if you shoot an ancient core with an arrow. Whether it is that going to be Sheikah fire? Because if it is, I haven't got a bow equipped. I'm going to have to
is it just going to blow up?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
I don't know whether anyone would bother trying to do this. Oh, nothing happens.
What a disappointing game.
Damn this game. It's so inconsistent.
You know what? I really liked this game, but this changes things. It changes everything.
It's just not Immortals, you know. That game's got more quests in it.
I love the skill tree.
I thought it was a lot funnier, honestly. It really hit my funny mode in the right place.
Okay, let's not rag on Immortals. Immortals is a perfectly fine game. It's just not Breath of the Wild, though, is it? I mean, come on.
I think that's also a big thing too. Is I don't want to bring comparisons in, but Immortals can use as a skill tree to build your character. Breath of the Wild, though, from the very beginning, what you start with are what you go through with the entire game: the bombs, the magnesis. All of that stuff, that's what you get right from the beginning, and you end the game with that. And somehow, it doesn't get stale. If anything, experimenting is just what makes the game even better.
It's almost like since the developers give you this, like, sort of, I don't want to say like a limited set of moves or resources in that regard, or skills, that it's like the developers, they knew what they wanted you to be able to do in the game, and they just took it like an extra step further by including all these extra elements, like how Alex was saying, and you guys were saying how you can shoot ore and it starts a fire, and you can do all these extra crazy things with bombs and arrows, and like how that there's that new video that released recently of somebody shooting an arrow or an ancient arrow basically like across the map and hitting a guardian. I don't even. What do you even say to that?
1,400 feet for that arrow too.
Meters.
They measured it.
Meters.
Oh, meters. Yeah, meters. Sorry.
That's insane.
I just don't even know where you'd even begin with something like that. But I think what you were saying about you said you didn't want to say it gives you a limited tool set, but I think that's absolutely the point, is that they give you a limited tool set, but it's not like, sort of you press, with swords you can attack. The sword is made of metal, therefore it conducts electricity. Everything has properties that affect everything else, and it breeds creativity because you do have a limited tool set. It forces you to be creative. It forces you to think outside the box and do things that you would do absolutely nothing in most games. And, just things like, you can throw your weapon at someone but it's metal and there's a thunderstorm. It's a classic example. You throw it at an enemy, they pick it up, and they get struck by lightning. It's just beautiful. And like the classic example of holding a cuckoo near a moblin. The moblin attacks the cuckoo, and then all the cuckoo friends come along and start attacking it. There is just a level of consistency that realistically you don't really get in. I'm struggling to think of other games where there's this level of consistency and this level of what they describe as the chemistry engine. There's nothing else like it that I can think of except maybe something like Minecraft, but even then it's not quite to the same degree.
Yeah, like something like Red Dead 2. Like my girlfriend's been playing that a lot over the past year, 2 years maybe even, and she's constantly finding new stuff. And now that we're talking about Breath of the Wild in like a similar way, it kind of gives me similar vibes where they've just put so many details into the game that players aren't always going to find in their playthroughs. Like realistically, you've put how many hours again? 230, and John's put over 300, and I'm like a fake fan over here with my measly 160.
Is that all?
I know, right? But
Get it together, Xeon.
See, I want to be able to play this game for the rest of my life and find Korok seeds, so I'm still finding them, but I'm happy with that. And that's the crazy thing though, is that we've put so much time into it and we're still finding new stuff, and that's. I don't want to say that's stupid because it's not. It's a beautiful thing. And how is it possible?
I'm going to bring up a point and also counterpoint my own point. But I love the feeling of mastery in this game. I love discovering that moblins, when they go in the water, they die immediately. So you can pick up something with magnesis and push them into the water, and they're scared. When they see something floating, they'll run around. So if you kind of point them towards the ocean, they will just die when they go to a certain depth. And I love that. But there's one thing I kind of like, kind of don't. So at the start of the game, Guardians are very intimidating. Like you go to Central Hyrule Field and you see a bunch of them just roaming around, and they'll one-shot you. So from that point you learn to kind of make your own path and don't necessarily just go through the field the entire time. But when it comes to the end game, when you have a bunch of hearts, you've got a full inventory, I find that Guardians are less intimidating. And because I can just parry their attacks instantly. Because their window is pretty big, and once you've got that down, I don't think you can really miss a shot. I don't think I've really missed a Guardian laser parry in a long time.
Have you played... Sorry to interrupt, but have you played Master Mode?
Yeah, I know Master Mode does delay the attack sometimes. I do appreciate that.
Sometimes, and that's the thing that really gets me, is it seems to be inconsistent. Which in theory, that sounds like, oh, that's a bad thing. But it's specifically trying to throw you off. They're faking you out. And when that happened to me the first time I played Master Mode, I was just like, oh, for God's sake, we're going to be doing this now, are we? But that's the best thing about it. It's not the best thing about Master Mode. It's just, carry on.
No, I do really appreciate that, actually, because I think it does make it less predictable, and that's something that the game usually strives for. But just those usual Guardian encounters can get quite predictable, especially for quite an intimidating enemy. And I wish that's something they kind of mixed up a bit, like maybe giving them more than just the laser attack. And I think this kind of extends to the Master Sword, to be honest. I feel like the system of always changing your weapons out is a great one. And the Master Sword, while it does need to recharge every now and then, once you've done the trial of the sword, it kind of trivializes things, because not only is the recharge time fairly small, I think you just kind of stick with the Master Sword most of the time, and I don't know, it kind of contradicts the system a bit to me.
I've never done... I have not an announcement, what am I talking about? I have a confession to make. I've never done Trial of the Sword, because I very foolishly told myself, oh, I won't do Trial of the Sword, until I can do it on Master Mode. I don't know if you've ever tried to do Trial of the Sword on Master Mode, but it is a soul-crushing experience in the best way possible. There's this one room, and I know everyone who's done Trial of the Sword on Master Mode will be immediately going, yeah, I know that one. It's basically where you go into this room. It's in the beginner levels, and there's all this water, and these, I want to say 3 Lizalfos. And unless you, react immediately, one of them sees you straight away. And if they see you, it's game over. Because, your best bet is to attack them and not knock them in the water. Because as soon as they're in the water, you're going to start using up the arrows that you need so desperately. And that's game over for the rest of the thing. And even then, they're regenerating all their health all the time. It is soul-crushingly difficult. But at the end of the day, you're playing on Master Mode. You're playing the Trial of the Sword on Master Mode. It should be soul-crushingly difficult. And I think they absolutely nailed it.
Yeah. I realise my criticism is the game gets too easy after 300 hours, which isn't much of a criticism. But I do hope Breath of the Wild 2 does have a bit more spontaneity in some of their enemy designs.
Well, I mean, it doesn't completely negate your argument, and I would say it's absolutely a 100% valid argument. But I kind of felt like the Flying Guardians, I can't remember the exact name for them, it might be Flying Guardians.
That's what I know them as.
Yeah, they pretty much completely made me have to rethink everything I know about Guardians. Especially, again, I don't want to harp on about it, but again, on Master Mode. They see you from about 4,000 kilometers away, and your usual tactic of, running up and slicing the legs off and haha, what are you going to do, completely goes out the window. It just doesn't work anymore because they'll just happily hover above you and then slap you with a laser, and you can reflect it, it's true. But again, this is on Master Mode, so sometimes they'll fake you out, and you'll quite often come across more than one at once, and so you've got two lasers to worry about, and if one of them hits you, you get stuck in a cycle. It's just, yeah. Flying Guardians, I love to hate them. I absolutely love to hate them.
I encountered some last night when I was playing, and I just turned around and went the opposite direction.
Yeah, they're wonderfully horrifying. But I think I'm just playing as we speak now. I should be recording it really, but I'm not. I'm just seeing the was Eventide Isle.
Oh man!
Oh,
those,
one of my favorite parts of the game.
Yeah,
those sections are just absolute. There are a couple of things like that. There's also the other sort of shrine where you're in the dark constantly in the like darkened forest. Those are just magical. And it's not
what's cool about that example too, Alex, is if you bring the Master Cycle into that forest, it lights up everything.
Oh my god!
I recently did that on my Master Mode game playthrough, and I've got the Master Cycle, and I didn't even think of it.
That's so funny. Last night when I was playing, I was driving around on the Master Cycle and was like, how do I turn this bloody light off? And I didn't even think about its like practical purposes.
As a light, despite it being... And again, it's that level of consistency. It's a light. It illuminates dark areas. But the stupid monkey brain in my head did not make that connection.
It's so great because like you guys were kind of saying earlier, like each item is not only like a sword is not only just a sword, a fire source, a pile of logs that you throw on the ground in the Goron Mountains, now just suddenly become a place that you can sit and rest, which happened to me last night. I wanted to turn it to nighttime because I was searching for the red dragon, which I can't remember any of their names.
Dinral.
But I was... thank you. Yes, starts with a D. Yeah. So I was searching around for that dragon last night, and yeah. So I went up. I was high up on a cliff, and I threw some logs down, and it instantly started on fire. And I was like, "Whoa!" I forgot that that's what happens when you're in those different parts of the game, and it's these little things that. Even if you've already done it before, there's so many little details sunken into the game that you're constantly just being re-surprised by things. I think I was just wearing some mountain attire at one point, and then I went down to this. I was trying to run faster, so I threw on the Darklink outfit, and it was nighttime, and I ended up going to the stables to go rest until morning, and the people there were totally scared of me, and and it's just like every single little moment like that just puts a smile on my face, just because the developers took that extra time to make the world just that much more believable, and they didn't have to do any of that. Just like in the same way how a sword, like how I was starting to say, a sword is not only a weapon that you can swing at someone, you can throw it at them, you can trick them into picking it up, you can use it as a source for lightning. You can pick it up throw it with your magnesis. It's all these extra little elements that they've added that I don't want to say they shouldn't have done. It just feels like they didn't have to, and they did, and it makes the experience just that much more rich and allows you to excusably play the game for over 300 hours, and that's not the craziest thing I've heard.
Two things there, Zion. Now, when I was Korok hunting, I didn't want to use up all my flame arrows because there's a limited quantity of them. And when you're in the ice region, there's a lot of Koroks which are just under big cubes of ice, and you've got to melt them. So what I did was I just equipped my flame sword. I didn't use it. I just held it. And that works as a heat source. And if you stand next to the icicles, it melts them. So you're losing up none of your inventory, but you're just utilizing what you have. And it's so clever.
It also keeps you warm.
It does. It also keeps you warm.
In a mechanical sense,
No
it keeps you
way.
warm. Yeah. It doesn't like do mega things, but I'm fairly certain the Great Flame Sword keeps you warmer than the normal Flame Sword. I'm really not certain about that, but it sounds right in my head, so it must be right.
It makes
So
sense.
cool. Yeah, it just does.
To your point about Darkling 2, Xeon, I remember discovering not that long ago, if you're standing on a table and you talk to someone, most NPCs will call you out on it. They'll be like, hey, I'm not going to talk to you if you're standing on a table.
What?
Yeah, if you go to to Terrytown and stand on one of the market stalls and talk to someone, they won't sell you things.
I'm playing the game right now. I'm going to Tarrytown and I'm going to
That's
see whether
great.
this is the
That's
real
great.
deal.
Oh, I have a Breath of the Wild confession. I still have not gotten nearly anywhere with Terrytown.
Oh, Xeon, that breaks my heart.
I haven't found is it the brothers? Is it just Terry's? I don't remember exactly what you have to go find, but
You have to
I haven't
find
found them.
Sun people.
Oh yeah. Okay. And I refuse to use a strategy guide, so I've just been letting it happen, and I haven't found them yet.
Would you accept some friendly advice?
I'm not gonna write it down, but I'll try to keep it from memory. That I see, and that's the thing is I've wanted.
Oh my god!
To,
Sorry, I've got metal things equipped and there's lightning happening. I need to change.
Oh no.
And my bow as well. God damn.
So quick side note here before we get back to Terrytown. Earlier, I don't even remember when it was last year, but I replayed the original Legend of Zelda, and I've started that game a few times and never really put my whole effort into it. I've probably played halfway through and just stopped every time. And then Philip Summers, he created a hand-drawn game guide, and we did a video on that and an article, and it kind of gave me a reason to go back and play the game. And I always think about what it must have been like to experience different things in different moments. Like one of my favorite things to think about is like how when the original Alien movie came out, apparently they didn't advertise it by showing off the actual alien or anything. So anybody who went into the movie and saw was really scared by the alien because they had no idea what was coming out of that film.
Yeah,
and I think Breath of the Wild's
the original trailer for Alien.
I think I have, but it's probably once, and then I probably watched 10 other videos afterwards.
It is like incredibly minimalist. Like it tells you nothing about the film, like to a ridiculous degree, where it's just like, are they advertising a film or like anything else? A pack of cards? I mean, that's a terrible example, but sorry, go on. I was about to make your point, I think. So go ahead.
Yeah, and so, like the original Legend of Zelda has kind of it just has that mystery about it where, back then you didn't have games like Breath of the Wild where the detail alone catches you. A game like Zelda on the NES had details riddled all over the place, but now our attention spans are we're not used to running around and exploring a game like that because we have way more epic things, but I wish that I could have lived in a time where we were standing around on the playground and chatting, trading secrets about the original Zelda, or in the break room, because I hear stories about people doing that back in the day, and Breath of the Wild for a lot of people can be that now. I remember I was at a tattoo shop with a friend years ago, and the guy behind the counter was playing Zelda, and while my friend was getting a tattoo, I went up throughout the session because we were there for a while and we just chatted about the game. And it's such a special thing that a game can like not just transcend so many different cultures and age groups and different people, and we all kind of like Pokemon, or just I guess that's just the special thing with video games in general, and that's that they all just bring us together. And I think that's the thing that I love most about Breath of the Wild, and why I haven't used a guide is because I love, I've learned so much just sitting here chatting with you guys about this game that I didn't already know. And it's so crazy. Like why is this game so big? How did they do it?
not using a guide, I feel, is so important. Like, I definitely went to the Goron town the wrong way. So what I did was I didn't get any like elixirs to negate any like fire or anything. What I did was got lots and lots of food. I climbed up Death Mountain, and I was on fire the whole time getting to that town. I was flaming. I was just running as fast as I could, trying to find out where the town was. I'm pretty sure you guys probably didn't do that, but the fact that you can do that, then when you finally get there, you can buy actual heat-resistant armor. It's just such a fond memory, because I know I was doing it wrong, but the fact you can do it, though, is what makes it special.
Yeah, the game doesn't reprimand you or anything for doing anything wrong, because there's pretty much no wrong way to do anything in the game. Incidentally, I've just got to Pellison and he's told me to hurry up and get down from standing on the table. And I think what you were saying about, sort of like the idea of talking about a game like the original Legend of Zelda, Xeon, I think that's the sort of thing that I had with the original Pokemon games, the playground chatter. And that is something that you don't generally get these days. But I think with Breath of the Wild, even with the internet, even with everyone finding out everything immediately, it still works because it is so content rich to such an incredible degree that there's no way that everyone can possibly know everything. There's probably stuff that nobody has found yet still, despite the game being, nearly 3 years old now? Is it 3 or 4 years old now? When did it come out?
Almost coming to 4. 4 in 2 months.
4 years old, and we're still just finding out you can feed bloody squirrels.
Yeah. I think it was last year that and people debate whether this is actually true or not, but I discovered that Lorelin Village is Outset Island from Wind Waker. And whether it really is, that's up for debate.
But
the layout is so similar. Like, you got that giant tower in the middle of the town, and the houses are near identical places to that game. And the fact just that small reference was packed into this village that, by the way, a lot of people haven't even seen. Whenever you talk about Lorelin Village, people are like, wait, which is that one? I've never been there before. It happens so often.
I love Lurlin. It's an entirely pointless village, arguably. It serves no major purpose in the game. But again,
is that the sort of beach village?
Just sort of rich and beautiful and pointless. And it's just there, and it's got a culture, and you can find fishing spears that are rubbish, absolutely terrible weapons, but you can pick them up, you can use them as weapons if you like, and they're slightly better than a broom. And this game, it's just so dense. It's a very confident game, because the developers were probably fairly confident, and they didn't care that 90% of people won't see probably 50% of the game, maybe more.
Yeah. If you look at achievements for games, you will see how few people complete games. I finished Nier Automata not that long ago, and on Xbox, I think the achievement for getting the final ending is around 4%. It's tiny. 96% of players did not get through the entire game.
Wow.
And with Breath of the Wild, we don't have those stats, but it's going to be similar to that for sure. But the fact that all that stuff is there in the first place is what makes it just so... it's just the reason we're talking about this today. It's just there's so much to talk about, there's so much to discover, and it's part of the reason why Breath of the Wild 2, despite not knowing a thing about this game, I'm sold. Like, there's nothing that could unsell me on that game.
No, I agree. It's just... I don't know what they could do wrong, how much they could get wrong in order for Breath of the Wild 2 to be not at the very least a passable game, unless they even if they stop making it open world or something like. They've just Breath of the Wild, they got so much right. They took so long with it as well that they clearly refined, and sort of how many games realistically can boast having, a development cycle that long, and we had all these ideas, and not just have people going, well, that'd be nice, but we don't really have the time. They were just like, we'll just delay the game 3 times, because it was originally supposed to come out in 2015. Was it 2015? It eventually came out in 2017, of course. That's a big delay for a game that originally had, whilst not a concrete release date, a release year. That's That's a bold move, but I don't think we'd be talking about this game now in this way if they hadn't delayed it.
No. And they hyped it for so long too. They announced it alongside Wind Waker HD, and they basically gave us this PowerPoint presentation where it's like, with the next game we're going to break conventions, please be excited for it. And then we didn't hear about it for a long time. But yeah, the confidence that they emitted in doing that is just so... like, no other publisher or developer can do that.
No, well, I mean, I'd love to be proven wrong, of course, but I've never seen any publisher take nearly the risks that would be involved in making a game like Breath of the Wild. And it's not just the gameplay, but everything about it, the style, the control, the damage, the aggression. No, that's Robot Wars. That's a reference no one will get. I'll cut that out.
Hey, you leave it in if you want. Someone will get it.
The richness of the gameplay, the interactiveness, every single element plays off everything else. And it just wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't happen. Please prove me wrong, developers, because I want more games like this.
I'm going to bring up one criticism that I don't agree with, but I hear it often. And I kind of want to hear Xeon's take on this, actually. So, a lot of big criticism
Sorry,
is
I've just discovered... What? I just got a Korok seed by hanging on a wall, and it refreshed my stamina.
Oh!
What?
That's like a speedrun strat.
Well, I don't know, because the amount of time it takes to get a Korok seed, but even so... What? Ah, Breath of the Wild! Ah!
That's interesting.
Bonkers. Yeah.
John, you were saying?
I want to bring up a criticism that I hear quite often that I don't agree with myself, but I kind of want to hear Xeon's take on this.
Okay.
A lot of people feel that Breath of the Wild's story was underwhelming, and that single-player aspect of the game, the core story, didn't live up to expectations. Now, I can agree in some aspects that the story wasn't as grand as some other Zelda games. However, I feel like when you spend that long in a game, and the hour count for the story occupies maybe 10 hours? It's not a very long single-player event. Probably more than that. Like more like 40, perhaps. But in the grand scheme, I feel like that is a very minimal amount of the game. Does it matter that that part's underwhelming when the rest of it's so good?
I think it's a tough thing, because I think if you're right, when you compare how much time you actually sink into the game, and thinking about like last night when I played for an hour and a half or whatever, I didn't experience really any story at all. I shot a dragon, I got its scale, I dropped it in a fountain that I hadn't already done. The statue talked to me a little bit. I talked to some of the there was well, I mean
I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, isn't it wonderful how, you've played the game for however long and you still hadn't done that? Oh
yeah, that's true. And but yeah, I didn't experience any story at all. I talked to Beetle a little bit, and I think when you look at it from a perspective of being immersed in the world, somewhat like I've heard, I had an old coworker, when he played Red Dead, he would sit down and he would ignore the rest of the world, and he would treat it like a role-playing experience. And I think Breath of the Wild does a great job in that regard of making you feel like you actually exist in Hyrule. And but one of my favorite games is Majora's Mask, and that game I feel like is the way that it is because of its story. And I feel like Breath of the Wild doesn't really capture that same sort of magic. And so I don't think, like, for me, I don't know if I necessarily wish that Breath of the Wild had more story, because if I was running around and I had, a companion character constantly nagging me about going and hunting down this dragon to go find this scale and do this mission, I'm not sure if I would feel as immersed in the world. But at the same time, I do sort of miss I do sort of miss that, I guess, from the game as well. So I don't really. I think I do want more story from Breath of the Wild 2, because we'll always have the standard Breath of the Wild to come back to. But it's an interesting topic, because I don't think they made the wrong decision by not including so much story. But I can see why not everybody is happy about it, because I go back and forth on the topic. But what do you guys, how do you feel about it?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up Majora's Mask, because whilst I agree Majora's Mask has a very deep narrative to it, I think it's actually closer in some regards to Breath of the Wild than maybe I've ever really thought about before, because although, yes, it does have this deep narrative and lots of stuff happens and not a lot happens if you don't interact with the world, but that kind of parallels with Breath of the Wild in the sense that everything you do is essentially of very sort of little consequence because you have to go back in time, because you have to reset things. And Breath of the Wild, everything you do is generally of very little consequence. You will sometimes do things that have an impact on other people's lives, but you never really get to see the full picture of it. And it's the same with Breath of the Wild in the sense of, I suppose the biggest thing you do apart from the main story, which you can do in, I don't know what the current speedrun record is, but like you can just run up and defeat Ganon like right away with a broom. But, you know, generally, apart from that, the biggest thing that you do, I think, is probably Tarry Town. And realistically, what do? You built a town and some people have somewhere to live. That's nice. Some people get married. But that's it. It has no greater impact on the rest of the world. In the same way that I suppose any of our lives have no great impact on the rest of the world. I'm getting philosophical now.
I think another parallel between those two games...
You need to play Nier, Alex.
You too, Alex. I think you resonate highly. I think another parallel between Majora's Mask and Breath of the Wild 2 is neither of them really thrive in dungeons. Like, they're both fine, sure. But Majora's Mask is better when you dive into the characters and the world, and you properly delve into their side quests. The dungeons themselves, they're fine. I wouldn't say they're as good as Ocarina. In fact, a lot of them I don't think are that great. But the game itself thrives when you're diving further in. Breath of the Wild, likewise. The Divine Beasts, again, they're fine. They're not the highlight of the game. I feel like both of those games are better when they're not trying to be traditional Zelda.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think in the same way as you said with Majora's Mask, because, I mean, I don't think we're going to have much argument if I were to say the best quest in that game is the Couple's Mask.
Oh, no, not at all.
I mean, that is easily one of, if not the highlight of the game. It's just, you know, this wonderful, deep story that is genuinely moving at times as well. And there is so much you learn about it. And at the end, it's of very little consequence because, you know, the whole resetting time and everything. But it is a genuinely moving story and something I didn't fully appreciate until I was, well, not as old as I am now, but older. Certainly when I was younger, I just thought, hey, this is a long mission. I still really enjoyed it, but I suppose I didn't really know what it was specifically. I couldn't put a point as to what it was that made me enjoy it so. But it is just so wonderful because it's about the characters, and you get a lot of that in Breath of the Wild. It's about the characters. I wouldn't say it was as deep as Majora's Mask by any stretch of the imagination, but it's that same sort of small scale involvement, that small scale stories about genuine people and characters that I don't think you really got in things like Ocarina of Time or, you know, Link's Awakening maybe. I mean, maybe Link's Awakening a bit, but, you know, we're sort of getting into sort of details. And, you know, something like Twilight Princess, it was nearly always about the grand scale. And whilst the grand scale is fun, I don't think it's the best.
I'm reminded of that one tiny mission where you bring together a Gerudo and a Hylian by that heart lake.
Oh, I love that one.
It's so small, but it just feels so powerful. You know, it's all these things that come together. They're not grand. They don't really set the world on fire. Nothing you do has major consequence. But when these small things come together, it just feels cozy.
And the fact that the guy tries to reward you and he gives you like 20 rupees and she's like, is that all I'm worth? There's real character in there. Real intrigue. It's not just, you know, sort of a standard, you know, it's not just like a dialogue box where he says, oh, here, I'll give you 20 rupees. And she says, is that all I'm worth? That would still be fun. But the fact you actually received the 20 rupees. And so you yourself are sort of thinking like, you cheap git. And then it changes. And then you get additional rupees afterwards. That's the level of detail. The fact that it's an actual interaction within and plays off the way that the game rewards you and the reward system. That just, I love that every single time. Every single time I come across the Heart Lake or Heart Pond, whatever it is, I'm always just like, oh yes, this one again.
I think I forget how funny this game is. Like, when you're in the Gerudo town and you go up to the seals and, like, you say something like, let's seal the deal. Or like, what's another one? Like, you talk to the guy and he's talking about the Master Sword. He's like, oh, there was a hero 100 years ago. And one of your options is, I am he. there's some brilliant dialogue in here.
It's proper memey, isn't it, in a way?
Better than Triforce Heroes, though. Like, the dialogue in that game could be god-awful.
There's a fine line and they managed to ride it perfectly.
That's one thing that I really hope. Speaking of story and all of just like the lovable characters, I really hope that Breath of the Wild 2 just takes that another step further. Since now that we have a staple gameplay formula, which of course Nintendo is probably changing up anyways, I just really hope they put more time into some of the side quests. Because I think I personally put Majora's Mask sort of on this pedestal for its side quests. Like I don't love the game for its mainline story. It's everything else that surrounds it. And Breath of the Wild, it does have a lot of that. But I felt that some of the side quests, not that, I mean, they're not, I don't want to say that they're not important. Because they definitely are to the experience. But they didn't affect me as much as they have in Majora's Mask as an example, and I really want to see more, just more side quests where you feel like it wasn't done in 20 minutes, or because I guess I think that's one thing that some of them felt a little bit shorter, and I want them to feel like a more proper adventure, I guess, like the Couple's Mask, for example, because that takes you a long time to get through, and I can't. I'm trying to think. I mean, I guess Terrytown, from what I've heard, is a pretty grand experience, but I still haven't done it myself, so I guess I can't say.
Well, I think
Did you enjoy finding 78 rush rooms?
You have to do. Wait, who did you have to do that for someone, or is that?
Yeah, there's one person who's like, I need 70 rush rooms, go find them for me. Not all side quests are equal. Some of them aren't the best, I'll be honest there. I do feel like, though, all of them kind of lend themselves to the ever-moving structure of the gameplay. Like, with the rush rooms, for example, you don't have to stay in one place. You can pick those up throughout the entire game, and you're fine doing that. And I understand your point exactly, Xeon. I think having a grander scope side quest that takes longer would be good, but I also don't necessarily know if it works that well with Breath of the Wild, because all these side quests are brief. I think that's just to keep you moving the entire time.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I suppose the town, or like, you know, in something like Majora's Mask, your land to explore is much smaller, and you don't have as many things to I don't want to say waste time with, but to spend your time on. So in that game, I mean, they are two completely different games in that regard, where the side quests, in my opinion, make the game. They are the reason to play. Where Breath of the Wild, the exploration is there, the story. I don't want to say it takes a backseat, but it is not the focal point from my perspective, at least. Just playing the game and experiencing its world is as Alex would say, the meat of the matter.
Can I just say
he definitely didn't just tell me to say that.
No, it definitely didn't cut that part out. Just want to say, can I just say Kilton? Kilton's fantastic. This is just this mad little goblin person who sort of goes, that's a peak.
He's terrifying.
I love that
until you encounter him.
He's well, yeah. I mean, like, I'm fairly certain you see like the back of his head, and it looks quite menacing, and that just happens to be like
absolutely.
a mask or something he's wearing backwards. He turns around, he's this goofy little bugger with this little moustache, and he sort of goes, and he has his own currency because he loves monsters so much. And you don't
really know what's going on with him, but you still trade him as parts anyways.
What does he do with those parts? We'll never know. Maybe he eats them. Maybe he just adorns his balloon with them. I don't know. I've given him so many bokoblin fangs. I don't quite know what he's going to do with them. But he loves monsters to the point that he's introduced a new currency which is used nowhere else. And realistically, it's a very little consequence because you're still, quote unquote, selling items, monster parts, which you would likely do anyway for rupees to get specific things. But you do it and you get Mon, and you use that Mon to then buy things from him. He's the Tom Nook of Breath of the Wild because you're getting Mon from him so that you can get stuff that he sells by giving him Mon back. It's illogical and it's wonderful. And you've got all these recipes. You can make egg, for example, and you can make a cake, and you can make spicy rice. And I love the cooking system. I think it's wonderful. I do wish there were more recipes, like more. Oh well, yeah. I mean, I did find, sort of. I think it was sugar, sugar cane, butter, egg, and wheat, and you make a cake. Like I guessed that, and that was
so good.
That was because that's what you do in real life. You put those ingredients together, and you get an egg. Not an egg, a cake. You get a cake. And it translates over here. And yeah, you can find it out, but I think it's fairly subtle as well. And you find new recipes just by seeing posters on the wall, and you're like, oh, combine those ingredients,
Right.
I make the thing above it. And it doesn't ever spell it out to you for those ones. There are some where it does. Absolutely. Some people will say, hey, can you make me a monster cake? And you can make a monster cake. But so many, just like you can make, I swear you can make like risotto or something. You can make pretty much anything. And you can also just cook 5 mighty bananas together to make a really overpowered meal. Or indeed, one hearty radish. Seriously, one hearty radish, the most overpowered recipe in the game. Fried wild greens, full health pack.
Yeah, and there is something to be said too about, walking into a stable and seeing a poster on the wall, and the game, like you said, it shows you how to make it, but it doesn't add a recipe instantly to your inventory. It makes you actually figure it out on your own, and it just adds to that sort of immersion factor of the game. And I love how dynamic the dialogue of the characters are too. To bounce off what you were saying about Kilton, is that his name? I always forget.
It's
I always want to
Kilton.
say Keaton.
It's Kilton.
Okay.
Keaton, that's Majora's Mask. You're back onto that one.
Exactly, I know. But when I was at the stable, I was talking to one of the guards that was there, and he mentioned that Kilton was in the surrounding area. So I quick walked outside and took a glance, and I was like, no, I'm not here for that. I'm gonna do my thing. I'm gonna go to sleep. But it's great how the game is constantly changing around its world. The game believes the world is real, and it just makes it all the more better for the player.
What I love about this discussion is with any other Zelda game, I think you kind of talk about moments. Like in Ocarina of Time, we'd be talking about the time when you go to the bottom of the well and it's all spooky down there. Or when you go to Lord Jabu Jabu's belly and you carry around the Princess's aura. And yeah, that's fine, that's all great. But we're talking about the minute gameplay details. I think that's kind of the difference with Breath of the Wild, is you make your own path, you do everything yourself. So what stands out is playing it, rather than experiencing what they want you to experience. I think that's just that's the key thing that this discussion's just brought to life, that Breath of the Wild is something for you, rather than something that everyone experiences the same.
I don't think anyone can have the same, any two people can have the same experience. I just do not think it's possible, because the game has so many variables. The game world is so huge, but not so huge as to be painfully big. I think that would be that would be a mistake if they were to make it any bigger than it really is, as it stands. It might be a bit too much. I could be wrong. I'm not a game designer. I'm not the man who has the perfect game in his head. But I think that there have been so many areas where they could have fallen flat, where they could have maybe done too much or not enough, and I think that they have balanced everything so to a degree that I didn't even think was reasonably possible. I mean, obviously, you could argue that there are areas where the game is slightly imbalanced. Maybe you feel that the weapons break too soon. That's not uncommon. And I think those are valid arguments. I wouldn't say I agree with them, but that doesn't mean that they're not valid. But when you look at the complaints for Breath of the Wild, they're all very, very minor. With a few exceptions, there'll be some people for whom the game just doesn't work. But it's like, oh, well, I didn't, I wish the climbing was a bit faster. I wish you didn't slip down in the rain. That's a common one. But you know what? It's like, okay, is that your biggest problem with this massive open world game? Is that during one kind of weather, you can't climb things efficiently? Is that the biggest complaint you have about this 300-hour game? That's got to count for something.
And that's exactly me. I mean, my biggest complaint is that the Guardians get a bit trivialized after 300 hours. And I think that's what makes this game so good, is that I think this is my favorite game, just period.
Oh, same.
Full stop. And I have things that I can criticize about it, but those things they don't matter that much. But the bigger thing is, how is Breath of the Wild 2 possibly going to top this? The Breath of the Wild is now a top-tier brand, and they're following it up. That's something you can't just do iteratively. This game has set a precedent for redefining what Zelda is, and if they just do it again, I don't know if that's going to have the same impact. It will still be good, but the impact won't be the same. So just imagining, how on earth are they going to... Not reimagine again, but how on earth are they going to follow this up? I can't even begin to comprehend what they're going to do.
I mean, I'm sure we've got some ideas that maybe we'll be, potentially looking into in a future video, but yeah.
We should do that.
It's
We should
pure
definitely do that.
speculation. There's nothing we can garner about how they're going to top this, whether they're even able to top this. I mean, I'm sure Nintendo are over the moon about Breath of the Wild, but the developers are maybe going, oh God, we've set the bar really high, because every other open world game that I've gone to play now, I'm still able to enjoy them. I'm not going to suggest that, they're rubbish now, but I have absolutely been spoilt by Breath of the Wild. It has spoiled open world games for me. I enjoy Skyrim, I really do, but I don't enjoy it like I used to, because it's not like Breath of the Wild. It doesn't, I think an analogy in my head for Breath of the Wild compared to other open world games. Other open world games, it's like driving around a test track. You're given the keys and you drive this car around and around in circles and make, twists and turns, and it's really exciting, but you do it a few times and, you start to see the same corners and, you start getting... Things getting a bit samey. Breath of the Wild is like being given a dune buggy and having this colossal expanse of which to drive around. It's not a track, it's not linear in the slightest. It's just go. Just go. And you sort of think, and do what? It's just go. You'll find something to do. And you do. And everything is just bloody marvelous.
So last night when I sat down to go play, I had mixed feelings about picking it back up, because I was being, like I mentioned before, I was being dropped in kind of a random area and I didn't know what to do. And I have a lot of the shrines done, and I've done a good majority of the game, but there's still little things here and there. And I was trying to think of, should I open my map and look around and try to find a destination to warp to or what? And eventually I did. After exploring a little bit, I went to an area that seemed unfamiliar, and I found one of the shrines where you're supposed to drop the dragon scale, and like I said, I hadn't done that one yet somehow, and so from where I looked at the map and I tried to remember where I had seen that dragon, and I went to the area that I thought it was in, and that in that same time, that's when I re-experienced dropping a log in the fiery areas, and it started on fire, and it allowed me to get to nighttime so I could see the dragon. And I was exploring the area that I thought it was in, and I encountered a Lionel, and I started I haven't played this game in a while, so a Lionel was a pretty terrifying thing to me, which is kind of nice because, like you said, John, Guardians are not as scary in the later game, but Lionel's still they crush me into the ground, and because they're so fast. And I think this might have been a silver Lionel, And but yeah, so I was fighting this Lionel, like trying to decide if I actually wanted to take it down or if I wanted to continue my pursuit of trying to find the dragon. And all of a sudden I look up and see, like, I can see on the top of my screen there's just a bunch of fire. And I'm like, is this from the Lionel? Did it shoot something? I don't remember Lionels having fire arrows. And it's literally the dragon that I was searching for. So while I'm fighting with this Lionel, I shoot up an arrow quick. I actually hit the dragon. A scale falls down. I'm rushing away from the Lionel because I'm running out of hearts and I'm too lazy to open up my menu and actually heal myself. I grab the scale and I just teleported out of there. But it was such a rush to experience all of that all in just one string, and it was so natural. And with a game that we've sunken so many hours into, it just doesn't feel like you should be able to find these constant surprises over and over again. And I was utterly amazed by just how the experience was, and it's something I'm going to be thinking about for a while now, just because it was so organic and so rich. It blew my mind that it was such a magical thing that all came together, that I happened to find the dragon in the spot that I thought it was, and I was having this epic battle at the same time, blowing through my ancient weapons, and I wasted a couple royal bows, and it was just such a cool thing. And I bet we all have stories like that too, which is, like you said, like both of you said too, with a game like Ocarina of Time. If we were discussing that right now between each other, we would probably be coming to talk about our favorite moments from in the game and how we experienced them. But here we're coming to the table with new experiences themselves, and that's the best part about the game. Is it's never over.
I think that about sums up the experience, really, doesn't it? I think in theory we could sit here for another couple of hours and continue talking about things. I mean, I'm sure there's stuff we haven't even touched upon, like using melons to push down switches, which is something that I discovered again over the Christmas period. You don't need like weighted objects. You can just drop melons. They're good for it as well.
That's great.
I think maybe we need to sort of knock it on the head, and it's been wonderful gushing about Breath of the Wild with you two, and thank you to all the people who are still here. Somehow, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you go to the comments and tell us your favorite thing about Breath of the Wild and hit that subscribe button. That's dull, but it'll do. And be sure to check out NintendoLife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.
Yeah! See you later! Like, every time I want to say something dumb now, it's just in the Sonic the Hedgehog voice. And I think it's both of your fault.